Good evening and welcome to this edition of the DoRight Initiative online session. With me today are two erudite professionals who have taken the leap and have gone to the business world and have conquered. And every day we hear that if you can't beat them, join them. But is that actually the right thing? And the questions we have to ask ourselves today is that, is it possible? Is it possible to do it properly? And as you all might be aware, this is the DoRight initiative, DoRight Awareness Initiative, which is a constellation of people, of Nigerians, who believe that we've gone on the wrong track and we need to mobilize ourselves, retool ourselves, rekit ourselves, and form a critical mass, and then begin to have things done properly. We have had to do right in the family. What does it mean to do right? We have to do right at work. We have to do right in school. And today, in December 2022, we're having the last episode of the year, and we're having it do right in business. What does it mean to do right in business? And I'm sure we have questions, and we're going to be able to debate. We're going to be as frank, as open as possible. And I mean, these times like this, I wish we could enforce the Chatham House rules, but unfortunately, it's an open house, but we need to begin to talk to ourselves. So let me just, before I introduce our two resource persons today, let me just tell you very little about the DoRight Awareness Initiative, just for those who do not know us. So our vision is simple and is very, very clear. We want to reawaken and entrench uprightness in Nigeria. You know, of late, I'm not sure how many of us have read the story of the Garuda Airlines of Indonesia. How through corruption, a massive growing airline crashed after filed for Chapter 15 bankruptcy because of corruption, owing 800 vendors. Now imagine the fate of those 800 vendors. Imagine those who probably have given 30%, 40%, 50% of the entire contract sum to be able to get the contract. Now they are owing their contractors, vendors, $13 billion. That is what happens where corruption and things thrives. Now, what is our mission? Our mission, and one of the episodes we're having today, is to be able to agree on that our mission, and this is to galvanize like-minded Nigerians. We might actually be in the majority, being oppressed by the minority, who understand the fundamental damage that lawlessness causes. It was Warren Buffett who made a profound statement. He said, you cannot do a good deal with a bad person. And that is what we want to begin to entrench in Nigeria. We want to do good deals. What are good deals? How do we ensure we do good deals? But it says you cannot do it with a bad person. And so I have two consummate professionals who will be taking it alongside with me today. My name is Tolulope Adewale. I'm your moderator for today. And the two professionals, one is Chuma Anosike. Chuma, do you mind? Chuma is a lawyer of many years and a diplomat who spends a lot of time in the corporate boardrooms. And so, Chuma, please, can you mind to introduce yourself?
Thank you very much. Good evening, all, and compliments of the season once again. My name is Chuma Anosike. A few things, but let me talk about maybe two or three. I'm a lawyer by training. I run a law firm. We do mostly corporate commercial law. There's a bit of litigation, but not too much. I also have a number of business interests, real estate, hospitality, and more recently, FinTech. Then I also have the privilege of serving as the Honorary Consul of Namibia in Nigeria. Just to explain a bit about that, normally to serve as consul of a country, you have to be a citizen of the appointing country. So, so people often ask me, "Are you Namibian?" I said, "No, I'm fully Nigerian." But I guess it's a mark of maybe the respect and the regard the appointing country had for me, that they thought it fit that I hold this position. And I've been privileged to serve in this position for going to 6 years now. So that's a bit about me. There are a few other things I do on the vocational side. I'm a passionate sports person. I used to play cricket, played a bit for Nigeria briefly, but I've then served on the board of the Cricket Federation at some point. Now I'm chairman of my state cricket association. What else is there? Okay, that's basically it. And I'm a proud Nigerian.
Thank you so much, Chuma. I'm sure people on the our guests have questions already lined up for you. They need to know. You're in the hospitality business, you're in the real estate business, you're in FinTech. These are areas where people need to know, people are trying to delve into, and they need to know what's happening there. Can they run it properly? Can they do it with integrity? Can they do it with uprightness? So Yinka Pearse has a very interesting story of who she is. Her resume is fantastic. How she turned from, I don't know which one comes first, an engineer or a teacher, a proprietor. I mean, Yinka, please tell us.
Thank you all so much. It's an honor to be here. Mr. Chuma, it's nice to meet you. So as Mr. Adewale has said, I started off as an engineer. And after 12 years of engineering, I decided that I wanted to become a teacher. I wanted to teach children because that was where my passion was at. So I obviously went to change career, studied to change career. Please take note. I didn't just go and start a school as people do now. You know, like everybody is starting a school, but I did go back to school, study to change career. And then I started my own school. And after years of running the school, I realized that we are struggling with teacher quality. So I decided to go back and train myself to become a trainer. We are called trainer of trainers. So I also train teachers to develop their skills. And in that process, I also realized that parents are also struggling. So oftentimes I volunteer to speak to parents on what they can do with their children at home, because the home is the first school, is the first place the child is learning from. So yes, the home is important. To a lot of parents, there is no textbook of how to be a parent. You read so many things, but every child presents a different thing. So yes, there is that. And that is me in a nutshell. So if you want to address me, I call myself an educationist. That's what I call myself, an educationist. So it's nice to be here. Thank you.
You know, when you're in the midst of a tutor and a learned person, then you're in trouble. Because you then have to watch every statement you make. But again, let me just take us back. What are the value reorientations that we're trying to promote? Number one is integrity. Number two, diligence. 3, mutual respect. 4, compassion. 5, justice. 6, courage. And the last of all, meritocracy. And taking this right into where we're going into. Chuma, do you mind if I ask you, start with you on this question? What exactly does it mean to do right? And put it into context. I mean, I was ruminating and I remember one of the famous statements quoted to Warren Buffett was that in a business, there are 3 things that are important: integrity, intelligence, and energy. And that if the last one, which is integrity, is missing, said don't bother about the remaining 2. So what does it mean as a businessman? What does it mean to do right? Is it to make money? Is it to free your conscience? What does it mean to do right?
Yeah, thank you, Tolu. You essentially have hit the nail on the head in a way. Yes, as a business person, obviously, you're not in a charity, you're not in a charity scheme. You want to make a profit, you want to make money, but there is a right way to make money. The challenge we have with the contemporary Nigerian situation is that people feel like the Machiavellian saying that the end justifies the means. So, whatever it takes to get it, just do it. And then you can atone later. You go to church or appease your conscience in some other way. But some of us believe that it's better you do it the right way. It's more sustainable if you do it the right way. And the earlier you start doing it the right way, the easier it is for you going forward. Because I always give the analogy, you can't be a crook for the first 10 years of your life. Then suddenly you have a eureka moment and say, okay, you know what, from today I'm going to change my ways and so on. It doesn't quite work that way. So it's better to start. And I want to just mention one key word: integrity. That is so crucial, particularly in today's Nigeria. It is a virtue that is in desperately short supply across board. People just don't mean what they say. What do you mean by integrity? Integrity is simple. Just say what you mean and mean what you say. It's quite simple. And then live what you preach. You understand? Too often these days, people say things they don't mean. I've been in a situation where somebody told me something, we shook hands, and later on he said, you don't really think I meant what I said? So he was surprised that I took him at his word. And he said, but you can't do business like this. So you have to. I said, no. But at a certain level, surely, if we come to an agreement, you tell me, okay, I'm going to do this by this day or whatever commitment you make to me, I expect you to stick to it. Now, if for some reason you have to change, the proper thing to do is to come back and explain whatever circumstances made you change. And hopefully you'll be telling the truth, So yeah, integrity is absolutely fundamental today. And as a lawyer, I can tell you, it's not, people feel, once something is documented, then yes, it's okay. It provides sufficient safeguard. But like you rightly said, if you want to crook, if you're crooked, if your intentions are not really very honorable, in spite of whatever documents you put in place, this is something I do for a living. So I've seen it over and over again. People sign contracts with all sorts of limitations and, covenants, warranties, undertakings, and yet they flout it at the slightest opportunity. So it's the person. If basically you're not somebody with integrity, regardless of whatever contracts you put in place, regardless of whatever commitments you make, invariably you would not honor those agreements. So I think it's important. And I think we should strive and this is not necessarily a Christian virtue. It is Christian in a way, but I think I don't want to limit this to, spirituality. And so it's just the proper thing to do. It's the decent thing to do, whether you're Christian, whether you're Muslim. You understand? It's a decent thing to do and you find invariably in the long run, it pays. It pays. Integrity actually pays. It comes at a cost initially. Let me not sugarcoat this. It comes at a cost because you may lose out in the short term, given the sort of society we're in. Because if you don't compromise, at certain times it will cost you. But I can tell you, integrity in the long run has its rewards, and it's far more sustainable. And like somebody will say, you sleep better at night when you told the part of integrity.
Okay, thank you so much.
I think let me know. I'll flog that point. Let me, I'll rest my case here. All right.
Okay. Like I've always said, two people you find difficult to stop when they start talking are lawyers and teachers. And so I have a very hard job ahead of me today. But you see, one of the things Chuma said, and I want to take it to Yinka, I need you to, he said you should say what you mean and mean what you say. So let's say you want to get a permit.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy says, you must pay me bribe. Does that mean he has integrity? Because he has told you. He means what he said, and he has said what he meant. Does that mean he has integrity? Or has he done right?
Number one, I think every Nigerian on this platform would understand that in Nigeria we have normalized bad behavior. Very simple. Things that people in I would say in saner climate people would not say things like that. If it said you are considered out of order, indeed, you could be jailed for it. However, in Nigeria, we have normalized bad behavior. So what do? You go back. I'm glad that Chuma spoke about documentation. And ultimately, for me, as a person operating in Nigeria, that's what I fall back on. So I go back and I say, okay, fine, this is what you asked for. I'll give you a very practical example. I run a school, and then they come to me and they say, the local government, they say that I need to pay for radio and TV license. And then I said, but I don't have a TV in any of my classrooms. The radio is used to play music in the classroom. What does a radio and TV license mean? And they said, no, you can't only be paying to Lagos State, you must be paying to us. So I asked them, they came in droves, you know how they come, to intimidate you. So I asked them, I said, okay, that's fine. Can you just bring me the documentation? And I tell you, they brought the documentation. So in that kind of instance, when they bring the documentation, honestly, you've lost your fight at that point. But in other situations, when there's no documentation, then you can say, oh, no, I'm not going to do that. So for me, instead of paying the bribe, I wouldn't pay the bribe. I'll ask them, what is the actual amount to pay? And they will tell you what it is. If there's a documentation to back it up, you have to pay it. So I would talk a little bit about doing right. I would like to speak, because when he was speaking, there were a few things that came into my mind. You know, at the start of this program, you asked us a question and you asked us to think about it, what it meant to us. And one of the questions immediately that came up was, is there a price to be won? So for a lot of people, doing right is about consequence, action and consequence. So if you're asked to do right, driving up a one-way street, what would deter anybody from doing that? It's only because if you're caught, you're going to be fined. If everybody knows you're not going to be fined, then there's no incentive to do right. Why should I not drive down the one-way street the wrong way? Why not? Because there's no incentive. And Chuma also alluded to something which I call the moral compass. Everybody must have a moral compass. Whatever it is you worship, it could be Olodumare, it could be anything. You could worship Satan, anything you worship. There must be some kind of moral compass. Something must guide you. You cannot exist without guidance. I don't think the human soul is designed to exist without guidance. Another thing that Chuma said I want to emphasize is that there is a right way to do things and there is a wrong way to do things. There is no gray areas. So as a community, as Nigerians, we have created these gray areas which do not exist in real life. There's a right way and there's a wrong way. I hope I've answered the question. I'll stop there before I go. Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Yinka. So let me just ask you one question. Now, as a small business owner, I mean, you've mentioned one of them. What are the challenges that you face that could debar you from doing right, and you have done right, and what were the costs, what are the consequences of doing that right as a small business owner? Because we have people here who are trying to get into businesses, who are trying to do one thing or the other, and they need to know that it's not just theory. What are those things?
Okay, so for me, I operate in Etiosa. So I mean, what happens is that there's a certain expectation. The government people, when they come, they have certain expectations. So what guides me is that I have made it my life journey to make sure that I understand my business very clearly. So when they come in, I always explain to them, okay, this is the reason why this is like this. They say, oh, but you have this place. I said, every room can only have this number of children. The fact that you see it this way doesn't mean I have that. So your expectation is this is what I'm doing. So what they come in, they ask you all sorts of questions. That we expect that is Nigeria. What matters is how you respond to them. What I try not to do is to antagonize them. So for example, Inland revenue is one of those things that people have a problem with. But I decided at the start of my business that I was always going to be on the right side of the law when it came to paying taxes. So I suffer for it because I pay so much tax that a lot of people don't pay. But I would rather do that. And when they come in, I'll give you an example. They came once. They came on the 15th of the month, and they asked us for our receipts. And we had already paid the tax for the last month. And the guy, in short, he was upset when he walked out of the school because he expected to come and harass us and ask us so many questions. So what I'll say is that find out what are the levies you're supposed to pay. It's the government. Even the Bible says, give unto Caesar what is Caesar's and unto God what is God's. If you have to pay taxes, pay your taxes. Yeah, it's going to take some of your profit, but ultimately, as Chuma said, he said, when you do right, it's hard at the start. But once you get used to that, this is my profit after tax, then you begin to plan thinking like that. But if you're trying to take all the profit before the tax, then it's a big problem for you. So you have to focus and think, okay, I'm going to pay the taxes no matter what it is, I paid. Now I can work with my taxes, what my profit is after tax. So that is how I operate. They are going to ask you to do things. Sometimes they come in and they ask you to do something that is not right. But as long as you know what I said earlier, you know what the regulations are. A lot of us don't know what the regulations are. We don't bother to read things. We're looking for someone to explain it to us. You can't, Nigeria, the consultants are in cahoots with the government. You don't need to learn what it is yourself. Once you find out what it is that you need, when they come, when you speak to them from a position of knowledge, they calm down and they listen to you and they say, okay, this is what you've said. Okay, this is what we need you to do. And that's it. Simply. I don't complicate things. I hope that has answered your question.
Thank you so much. This issue you have raised takes me to the next thing I want us to discuss. And it is what does it mean to do right to regulators, to our regulators? And in each business, in each sector of the economy, whether it's the financial sector, whether it's the FinTech, whether it's the educational sector, whether it is the medical or legal, there are professional bodies, there is the government agencies, and then there is the tax authority. Now, there's a maxim that says the only two things are sure in life, tax and death. These two things that are sure in life, tax and death. So, Chuma, as a lawyer, what does it mean? What obligation, and as a businessman, what obligation do you owe the government? Forget about whether the government plays its part or not. As an individual who is starting up a business, what obligations do you owe the government? What obligations do you owe the tax authorities? What obligations do you owe the professional bodies? And how do we make this come into play to do right in each of these entities?
Okay, thanks, Tolu. Yinka, thanks as well for expatiating on some of the points I raised. And I just want to take off in answering this segment from what Yinka said. I find maybe I'm in a privileged position as a lawyer. So it's part of our business to know the law, to know the regulations. So what I find, a lot of both clients and just people I know, there's, and I use this word guardedly, some level of ignorance about what the laws are regarding your particular area of business. So I think the first advice I'll give, like Yinka has alluded to that, is actually inform yourself, acquire knowledge, whatever sector you're playing in, to the extent you can. If you can't do it yourself, maybe get a good lawyer or an accountant who would advise you honestly and sincerely about basically give you advice about that space you're playing in, particularly with regard to regulations and laws and so on. Because a lot of what happens when these guys come calling, particularly the tax people, tax laws typically are quite complex, to be honest. Even as a lawyer, we have a tax consultant in the office. That's how bad it is. So, where you need knowledge, get expert advice. That's what I would advise. So for those areas, you need to be informed. Because what we find, both from a personal and professional point of view, is a lot of these guys take advantage of the ignorance of most people. There are people who will wave something at you, a law that doesn't exist, they'll flash it at you. A law that's been repealed, they'll flash it at you. Now, if you don't know, of course, you're going to, you'll fall for it. So I think the first thing I would advise, get up-to-date information, get expert advice on whatever sector you're operating in. Because obviously, hospitality, fintech, real estate, each sector has its own guiding principles and so on. So in terms of your obligations to the government, I think the first thing is obviously to pay your taxes, both personal income tax, company tax, and so on. Now, what you want to do naturally, and it's well within your right to do this, you want to pay as little tax as possible. You want to save some money. You understand? Again, within the laws, there are ways you can legitimately save money. There are all sorts of allowances you can take advantage of, as waivers and so on and so forth. But if you're not informed about those laws, you won't know. So that would be my first, point of this thing. Then in terms of dealing with regulators, again, the same principles. If you're armed with information, you can actually then not necessarily confront. Maybe that's too strong a word, but you can, make your case. And generally, what I find is that when you push back with knowledge, with information, because these guys, a lot of them don't necessarily come, how would I put it, with the full knowledge of their bosses and so on. They are, like I said, they're taking advantage of the general level of ignorance most people have. So they come at you with obsolete laws, regulations that don't exist, and they say, okay, everybody else is doing it. And then unfortunately, because not enough of us push back. So invariably, if you call your friend who has probably complied, you say, but just settle them, and you move on. So the response you will get from the couple of 2 or 3 people you would call will probably tend to suggest that you should settle. Where if you fought your case, you'll probably win. Now, again, because I think I'm in a peculiar position, because we have some knowledge of the law, we've successfully resisted this for clients and so on over the years. So it's not, what I would advise, because I think part of the engagement here is to also give some sort of advice for those who need it. Get information, get relevant information, up-to-date information, because these laws change fairly frequently sometimes. So with that, you then can take a position. So if legitimately you're supposed to pay tax or some levy, then you pay. And within, the other thing I can tell you, within the tax laws and so on, you can actually negotiate either a structured payment. So sometimes it may not be as bad as you fear, And again, these guys play on this. So if you come to them, say, look, okay, my tax liability is, say, proposed value is 6-7 million. Then within the law, you can actually have a structured payment to enable you manage your cash flow and so on. So these are things you can do. I don't know if I was actually going to speak on something else, but I don't know, Tulu, if you come to that later, in terms of paying a price. And I suspect there are people on this call who are a bit younger. Now, and Tulu talked about being practical, because I think it's important that, particularly for the younger ones, you hear real life stories. In my earlier days of practice, I talked about integrity. It comes at a price. I'm going to give you 2 practical examples. We had a client, this would have been like 20-something years ago, when one was still struggling. So, and the pressure is more when you're struggling. When you're a bit more comfortable, you can afford to, quote unquote, do right or do better, But those difficult times where the extra 10,000 will come in useful, that's when the pressure is. And that's when you really need to make that commitment to do right. We had a client who he was negotiating some transaction with the bank. Now, he was a bit ignorant, to be honest, and he'd gone ahead and almost locked in a deal which was totally not in his favor. Fortunately, he called me in. So I said, no, there's no way you can get a better deal than you did. I hope you haven't committed anything. He said, no, he just discussed with the MD. Okay, I should go in and sort it out. I got to the bank. Naturally, you go fail. These guys thought they had got a great, it was more than a sweetheart deal. They basically crooked the guy. They cheated him. So I called the general manager. I said, but this is not a fair deal. Why would you? And the MD is supposed to be close to my client. So you took advantage of this relationship and basically just, cheated this fellow. I said, well, I'm here now, so we have to, this thing is, he said, no, they've gone too far. I said, no, the information I have is that the contract has not been signed. So as far as I'm concerned, it's not just give me a minute. I'll just round up. I'll try and abridge the story. And so I basically reopened the matter. And to cut a long story short, I got the guy I think the value he got eventually was like 8 times what he had negotiated. Now, the interesting story is along the way, these guys at the bank came dangling something, say, this guy is not your uncle. Now, which one you did? They offered me quite a substantial sum of money. And like I said, at that time, what I was offered could have, made a significant difference to my life. But I said, no, this is my client. I'm fighting for his interest. This is a matter of integrity. I cannot come and, you know the game, So I refused. Now, so basically, the bank became very hostile. Now, that's not where it ended. Now, I fought for this client. You would have thought the client would have appreciated what I did. And I said, okay, fine. These are my fees because I had to do the documentation and so on and so forth. The client now said, go back to the bank and collect your money. You can imagine the bank that you held your feet to the fire. You now have to go back and negotiate fees. Essentially, I walked away from the transaction without any money. So you can imagine how bad I felt. So I went back to the client and said, oh boy, this is where we were. This is what you were going to get. This is what I got for you. Through my effort, it's clear that without that intervention, you had accepted that amount. Pretty much, you had accepted that amount. I now got involved, and then to pay me some token fee for my documentation, I should go back. Anyway, so that's what I'm saying. Integrity can cost you. Integrity can cost you. Now, the flip side is that years later, somebody who was related to this client heard what happened. He called me to a deal. We did the thing, and he paid me 3 times what I was supposed to get, purely based on the fact of what had happened before. So, like I said, at the end of the day, it pays. And today, that other person is probably my second biggest client. This happened 20 years ago. I hope I haven't taken too much time.
Thank you so much about, the few things you have mentioned about the issue about delayed gratification, which is something that I think is missing. And so, Yinka, I know you teach children, and as an engineer, I know that delayed gratification is one of the things that will be uppermost in your in the thoughts pattern. Do you want to give us live examples? Because people are learning and listening and are soaking this in about how you have been able to cope and navigated these waters of government, of professional bodies, and of the tax. You spoke to us about the tax, what you've done to be able to succeed. And then if you can then mention about how governance on your board, our issue of corporate governance has helped you and has guided you to succeed as a business.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think we're also listening and listening. Thank you, Chuma, for that. That was a very good story. So when he was talking, and I was thinking, okay, so in terms of education, we're dealing with human beings. Every day you're dealing with someone's feelings, you're trying to develop, to support a child to develop. So for me, I always think that ours is even more important, that your integrity is always at the forefront of everything that you're doing. That you're always honest with the parents. You are not in any way trying to, pretend that, something exists that does not exist. So in terms of how have I done it over the years, what I have done, I'll tell you, when I was trying to get my approval from the regulators, I'm sure some of you, if you've dealt with Nigerian regulators, whatever area you're in, area of business, you know that a lot of them are ill-equipped to regulate you. They often don't even have the right standards to regulate you with. I don't know where they get their standards, but they do come in like that. So when they came, they were like, madam, why are you putting this here? You should open this place up, put more children in this room, and all of that. But you know what is the right thing to do. And I always say something, where I cannot have my children attend the school, I would never bring somebody else's child into that space. So they said all of that. I said, no, don't worry, sir. This is how we want it. We want the classrooms to look like this. We want the space. We want to use this for the children to play. So for us, what we've done is that you are going to be the one to, I say to other educators that what we do is that we self-regulate. So what we are doing is we're self-regulating, because Nigeria is the kind of place that if you have enough money, you can get away with murder. So you have to have your own moral compass and self-regulate. So what we do, or what I've done over the years, is I self-regulate. And what that means is that it costs me more to run the school than it will cost someone that is willing to bring down their standards and operate at lower standards. After all, some school owners say the parents don't even know the difference. What do they know? But you know deep down in your heart what kind of quality of service you're offering to the parents. And for me, it's the children, because the parents are not in the school. The children come in there every day. So you want to do the best for the children that are in there. And yes, it's tough because your school is never full because, number one, you're charging too much per head because the children, you're trying to give them a kind of quality environment, quality education. And other people are doing less, and parents are like, okay, that school is cheaper, I'm going there. So then you don't have enough children. So you don't make as much money. But the key thing is I sleep well at night. And every time I come in there and I see the children, how happy and how they're developing, that is it for me. It is not just about the money. And let me just clarify that it's a privileged position to come from that point to say it's not just about the money, because a lot of people, it's about the money. They have to make the money. So I'm not trying to pretend that oftentimes for me, it's not about the money, it's about the quality of service. So for me, that is just me. However, if it's for you, it's for the money. If you're trying to make the money, there is a balance. You can create a balance to it. You can provide quality and you can still charge the right fees for that service and still get what you want. So that is it. In terms of corporate governance, I think the key thing is to build integrity, to build the trust of people over time. Because what happens is that most schools now, it doesn't matter. I can put my siblings, I can put my closest friends on my board, and I can decide and do what it is that I want to do. Ultimately, it's still down to the integrity of the people that are running the school. Because if they lack integrity, honestly, that you can have a corporate board, you can have your board of governors, your board of trustees, there might be, any, I would say, renowned people in the society. You can still decide. It might be your cousins, they might be your best friends, and you can still decide, this is how I want to run it, and you just run with it. So I think ultimately it comes back to that integrity, that, having respect. I think that mutual respect was what you said earlier, mutual respect for the human being, because without respect, we would not do right. We have to respect the next person. And you have to, as you say, you have to believe in meritocracy. You mentioned meritocracy. That's another thing. You have to believe in doing right. That it's either I do right or I don't do it. You have to believe in that. And let me just stop there. Let me stop there at this point. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Chuma, let me take you back on this issue of corporate governance. And please, our participants, please, if you have questions, if you have comments, please raise up your hands. And Tiayo and Tosh, who are the host and the co-host, will let me know and we will read it out. Now, if in this same country, about 20 or so years ago, a chairman of a board of a bank resigned, and that bank collapsed within 2 weeks. And looking back on this issue about respect, meritocracy, and compassion, how does the integrity or the courage or justice or the respect for the board, for corporate governance, how does it impact the business, negatively or positively? And we've seen where there are board wranglings leading to the board, leading to the business suffering. And we see situations where people will say, because of the respect we have for somebody on your board, we will do business with you. So how does that tally? And then finally, I want you to speak to me to speak to the audience, issue about, or this same issue about the professional bodies. Now, there's a current issue lingering about the body of benchers, where a report, an email was sent from the chambers to the body of the chairman of the body of benchers, apparently indicting all of them in that firm for wrong practice, and yet everybody is quiet.
Let me start with the first thing. I think with the board of directors and the whole corporate governance issue. Well, one aspect is to look at what the law says. Another aspect is the practicalities of operating within the ambit of the law. Now, in terms of, I'll just try and go through this quickly. Normally, the Companies and Allied Matters Act makes provision for who can serve as a director and so on and so forth. But typically, and then the provisions are actually quite clear. But, Nigeria, we have a way of just corrupting everything. So in spite of those sort of restrictions, you still find people of questionable character getting onto boards. Now, again, you have a broad distinction between public limited companies, where the impact is probably more, and then private companies, where a man, his wife, and children can set up this thing. So probably we'll deal more with the PLCs, because that's where the greater impact is. So typically, again, to qualify, so why I'm going through this? So ab initio, you have a situation where if the director is not really qualified, is not suitable to hold that position, you're going to have problems. That's why I'm going back to the foundation, if you know what I mean. So it's important in choosing a board, in composing a board. And I'm talking about this both from a practical and a professional point of view. I'm involved in a corporate boardroom tussle at the moment. And it has to do with the character of the person that's causing the problem. The laws are there. The laws make clearly, under this, you can do this. This is what you can do. These are voting rights and so on and so forth. In spite of that, the person is causing all manner of problems and threatening to wreck the company, basically. So that's why it goes to the character of each individual director. Because, I can't emphasize that too much. So, but corporate governance is ideal. And I'm happy to know, I think the positive is that a combination of the new CAMA and then the FIRS regulations, Financial Reporting Council, at least for public companies, there's some level of decorum and some level of adherence to corporate governance principles. So that, I think, is improving on a general level. But I think private companies still need to imbibe that. So again, that speaks to character. Now, with regard to the issue of the body of benchers, that is something that has left a very sour taste in a lot of our mouths, because the issues to some of us are actually quite clear. Now, for us as lawyers, particularly when you're operating at a certain level, there are some things you do not do. Some of them are, contained in statute, the Legal Practitioners Privileges Committee and so on. Some others are just conventions and norms that have been built up over the years. Now, you don't solicit for clients. And even if you do, it's not so brazen. Now, the facts of this matter, for those of you who don't know, an email was generated from the chamber of the person who happens to chair the body of benchers in Nigeria. Now, the body of benchers is possibly, arguably, the highest body, comprising of not just judges, but senior lawyers and so on. And so the chairman typically should be somebody of impeccable character and integrity. So that's that's what it should be. Now, obviously, what happens in practice is not exactly that. So email emanates from the chairman's chamber, chairman's office, chairman's firm, basically soliciting. Now, it goes beyond soliciting. Now, it's tended to run down. Another lawyer had been engaged to handle a particular matter. Obviously, it's a very significant matter, running into millions of dollars and so on. So the stakes were quite high. And this person basically posited in writing that her boss, and this is a partner, it's not a clerk. So that's why I want to put the facts out there so you appreciate the gravity of the situation. A partner in this firm posited that her boss, her principal, is how did she put it now? I'm trying to pick the exact words, is the head of all the lawyers and judges in Nigeria. And in that position, he is able to basically manipulate and game the system. This was put in writing. It wasn't said, it was documented, so there's evidence. And now, of course, and you see, something with Oyibo clients, and this is not a race thing. You see, I think they have evolved to a certain level. So there are certain conventions and norms. Even they are aware that there's a way you pitch for jobs. So you typically do not run down a professional colleague, even if you're soliciting for a job, no matter how juicy the job may be. I've been in this position where people have come, oh, that guy he runs a small office in Nigeria. We're not even sure he's practicing law. Unfortunately for the people who are soliciting, I know the people who they came back to me to say, look, this is what these people are saying about you. But we just disregarded them. So the same way, these Oyibo people send the email back to the lawyer who was being belittled, essentially. That's when the thing blew open. So that's half the story. Now, the bad part of the story, or the unfortunate part of the story, is that as this became public, you would have expected that this guy would have done the honorable thing and at least stepped down from that position. Because invariably, if there's any sort of petition or some adjudication to be had, it will end up with the body of benches. So you cannot be a judge in your own cause. That's one of the classic maxims of law. So naturally, in any decent society, without being prompted, he should have stepped down, recused himself, as we say. But the guy stayed in the till today. He's still in that position. And he's gone on to argue that the fact of the thing being brought out was like kind of blackmail. People were trying to intimidate him and all that. So again, so what can you say under those kind of circumstances? And he's gone ahead. There was a call to bar recently where he presided. And he's talking to young lawyers about integrity, doing the right thing. He went on to say, don't listen to blackmailers and that kind of thing. And people are just shaking their heads in disgust. I'm happy, though, in the middle of all this, the current NBA president, as a matter of principle, said he will not attend the ceremony because this guy was presiding. And a lot of people have applauded that position. So it's important that some people are called out when integrity issues come up, particularly at that level. You need to set the tone. I think I'll stop there.
So that's the question we're asking. Where is corporate governance, and how does corporate governance help us in this kind of situation? I think, Yinka, maybe among tutors, maybe there's a better way of, you've spoken to us about self-regulation, about how you've done that yourself. So how do we strengthen corporate governance? But somebody asked a question. Gina asked the question. She said, how do we imbibe? How do we get to Linda, do you want to speak? Okay, I think she's muted out. So
the question people have discussed recently on Nigeria have said, even if people with integrity are elected, the system is still corrupt. I'm sure some of you may be familiar with the Peter Drucker quote that says what? It says culture is what? Strategy for breakfast. So the problem, should I say this, for me, from an educationist point of view, the problem or the steps, the first step to solving the problem is education. And I'm not talking going to school to read and write. Education, children are educated in school. Yeah, there's 4 walls of the school where you get educated, you learn how to read and write. And then the society is another classroom. So how have we learned how to, I'm saying we because we've all learned bad habits, bad behavior. How have we learned it? The society has taught us by confirming or even showing us, like when you get on the queue, if I have money, I can bribe to get ahead of the queue. The society has taught us that. So it's education. We have to the society has to find a way to educate the population. Now, the problem with Nigeria's education, or what people struggle with, is that they say we still don't have a high level of literacy. Now, this is what I say. Literacy is the ability to read and write. It doesn't say English language. So, in the north, the onus is on the educated population to speak the language, to educate the population. The same thing in the South. You come, you educate them in either if it's Ondo language, it's Ekiti, it is Ijebu, it is Ijesha, any Ibadan, any of the languages. There are people that are educated that can educate people. So people need to begin to educate for them to understand. Because if we do not educate, the culture would not change. And whatever strategy, whatever it is we're trying to do, whether the president is one person, the CEO is one person, he's not going to
Can we all hear her?
consequences. If there are no consequences, people will continue to do wrong. There has to be consequences. And that I throw to, I know it's not your purview. I mean, I know you're not a regulator. Is the system, the judicial system, that has to change. Because once there are consequences to actions, why do you think people, the human being wants to explore, and the human being wants to push boundaries. The human being wants to test that if I do this, what would happen? That is how that's science. Testing. What is it? How far can I push the envelope? That's what science is. So we, as human beings, we want to test. We're always testing boundaries. We're always checking, what if I do this, what would happen? If I do this, what would happen? And if we keep pushing and that envelope that elasticity is there, we keep pushing and pushing, we'll keep pushing. So the way that all of this is going to change, first, education, because when people don't understand the impact of what they're doing, they keep doing it. But once they begin to understand the impact, then they change. And the second thing is consequence. There has to be, you must be punished. Let me just say it very simple. You must be punished. If you do something wrong, there must be punishment. You cannot just be getting away with doing wrong scot-free. I hope that answers some of the question. I'm sure Chuma would have a lawyer perspective to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Yinka. So there are two other questions. Chuma, I will be glad if you can take them. But before that, first, I think we need to apologize. I thought it was Mr. Evans Adetokunbo Emmanuel who asked the question about whether there was a price to the quiz, but apparently it was not him, so we apologize for that. But he has a question, and Chuma, I want you to take that. He said, what role does culture play in the knowledge of what is right and wrong, considering that culture is very dynamic? And as we go into that, since we have less than 7 more minutes, in answering this question, please, could you relate it to how do I do right to a vendor, or how do I do right based on culture to my clients and to my students, to the parents, and to the community at large? How do I do right to them? What does it mean to do right? Is it by, as long as I make money off them, have I done right? Even if I give them the service and I charge them 10 times because they don't know, have I done right? Or what does it mean to do right to your clients? Please.
Okay, I think let me speak about culture. Now, I think we're all old enough here to realize that in terms of our moral values, we've been on a downward slope, maybe 20, 30, perhaps 40 years. So, Yinka, as much as I agree with you, I also want to differ slightly. Formal education does help, but I think across board, whether you're Igbo, Yoruba, Edo, Ijaw, Hausa, when we talk about our parents and so on, there was certain truth is truth. A lie is a lie in any language. There are certain values that we were brought up with, which unfortunately seem to have eroded in the last, like I said, 10, 20 years. So in terms of knowing what is right and what is wrong, I'm not sure that's necessarily a literacy issue. In any language, there's good and there's bad. I think what has happened, two things, and here's where I agree with you. Impunity. Two things have happened. People have gotten away with stuff. So this issue of consequence has not been addressed. Over the years, people talk about, this is not a very good example, but it just
Sorry,
gives you an idea.
Chuma, please, Linda Rufus, please, can you mute? There's a lot of interference coming up from your mic, please.
Okay, thank you, Tulu. So a lot of what has happened, if you look at what people could get away with, say 20 years ago, they do 10 times worse today and they still get away with it. So this culture of impunity, now we're talking about culture, there seems to be a culture of impunity that you can get away with quote unquote murder. And because there's no consequence, now most young people looking at, because again, this is part of what we're hoping to do, address some of the young people so they understand what some of the issues are. If people see people who commit crimes get away with it on a consistent basis, then it's not likely this whole thing would, it becomes part of the culture. This thing we're talking about culture, that seems to become what is accepted practice. And so you can quote unquote call it culture. So I think we need to just identify where the issues are. There's some level of moral decadence in society, regardless of the level of education. Some people who are educated are still morally decadent. So I'm not sure it's entirely a function of formal education. So that's that. And sorry, Tolu, what was the second aspect you wanted to speak of before I think I lost my train of thought there?
No. So I said, in answering that, thinking about client, what your obligation, what you owe to them.
Okay. Yeah. So from legal point of view, I think I cited an example before. You owe your client is a fiduciary duty. Somebody's speaking. Okay. It's a fiduciary duty. You owe them loyalty. You owe them diligence. And you owe them fairness in terms of pricing. Although, again, some of my colleagues will argue with me on this because generally there's a perception about fees. The older you are, the more you charge and so on and so forth. I guess in a way, it's putting a value on your time and your resources. So, but I don't want to get into that here. But you should charge a fair amount. But I think the most important virtue is integrity and diligence. When you are engaged by a client, you do what is best for them. I tell people my own motto is I would assume I'm doing this for myself. So I'll put myself out as if it's my own job. And I think over the years, clients will come to appreciate it when you go over and above what is required in discharging your duty to them. So
thank you so much, Chuma. So we're running out of time. Yinka, your last word on that specific area of your clientele and vendors. Like I said, remember the Garuda issue.
Sorry, what did you say? The Garuda issue?
The Garuda issue. I spoke about how the Garuda, the airline of Indonesia, that crashed out to file for Chapter 15, owing 800 vendors, and the corruption was the basis. So many of them will have paid bribe, 50% or probably of the total contract sum. Now they are being owed, 800 vendors is being owed $13.8 billion. And the company has gone bankrupt, and that's it.
Okay. Thank you. So I only have 2 minutes. I'm just going to quickly speak to moral values, which is what Chuma was saying. And I clarify that I was talking about the society as a way to educate people, because in the society has a way of affirming your values. So you're at home, your parents teach you these moral values. When you go into society, they'll tell you this is not how we do things here. And that a lot of people, because they want to succeed, tend to do that. And that's what I was trying to explain about. We can disseminate the information in whatever language. It doesn't have to be in English language, whatever it is. Just to clarify that. In terms of the society and moral values, which is really the thing that drives you to do right, I think everyone has to it's a tough one in Nigeria, because Nigeria is a very hard terrain to operate in. So it's very difficult for people to say, I'm going to do right. Because indeed, a lot of people don't have a country that has 66% poverty level. This is government Government has confirmed this. A government body has confirmed this, 66%. It's very hard for you to tell people, don't take bribes, don't do this, don't do that. So I think what we want is that a few of us, as we begin to do it, so we can form circles, like circles of, okay, over here in law, we have the people that are doing right, and they are making it. In education, we have people that are doing right, and they are making it. So as we all begin in forming small circles in our different professions, in our different areas of influence, spheres of influence, we begin to from people seeing that we are actually existing and we are making money, we are not suffering, they begin to say, okay, maybe if we turn to this other side, maybe there's hope for all. And I think that's the only way we can do it. There's no other way I think we can get to the point. I am very conscious of time, so I'm looking at my clock here. I don't want to run over time. I hope that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank
you. Yeah,
thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to every one of us. We've run out of time. And in closing, the things that are critical. First, thank you, Yinka. Thank you so much, Chuma. What we've learned is that, yes, it is possible to navigate these murky waters successfully. And the success comes through delayed gratification. And the three is that we can all begin to retool. Culture is dynamic. We can learn and relearn. And as we learn the right and proper thing, that it is possible to navigate these murky waters. As we go into the new year, I pray that God's blessings be with each and every one of you, and that we'll also the new year. And as we begin on this journey of integrity, justice, meritocracy, and courage and justice, we will get to the final point. And those are the guiding lights. Those are the guiding principles for overcoming that mountain, the picture I showed at the beginning. Thank you once again, and see you in the new year. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you. Bye.